Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. We got a special one for you today. We're going to be doing some listener Q&As. You can find those at the end of the podcast. There's show notes down below that'll tell you exactly where those are if you want to skip ahead to them. But for now, we're going to be talking with my stepdad, Mike Dillon. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Glad to have you on. First time you've been on here in 500 episodes.
Yeah.
530-something
That's
episodes.
right. Then we got two other hosts. We got Jacob Myers.
Yep. Yeah.
We got Clyde.
We got Clyde.
Scott Seals gets that reference.
Yeah, Scott. Yeah, Scott and the YouTubers get that reference. But no, dude, I'm excited because Mike, it's fun to have you on for this this breakdown episode, just because we've talked about you so much on the podcast and like your journey as a deer hunter. Because we're gonna talk a little bit more like you didn't grow up as a deer hunter. You're just like last year you hunted a couple times, right?
Yeah, about 2 or 3 times.
And then this year you're going like all out
Yeah.
and having close encounters after close encounters, and it's like it's gonna happen at some point.
It's kind of.
So that's why I wanted to get you on. That's one reason I asked you about coming on the podcast, because I'm like, I want to get you on before you kill a deer and then after you kill a deer.
Okay.
And to see, I want to read the room and read also mentally and physically how you feel before and after. So we're going to test some of that stuff out today, because you've had so many close calls. It's like, I think all of us can kind of understand. Like I told this on the podcast, when I started bow hunting, I think I went 4 or 5 seasons before I actually like killed a deer with my bow. And it was just so many missed opportunities, missing deer, not making bad shots on deer. And then finally it clicked and I was like, oh, this is awesome. it all came together. So
I was
excited.
saying, I missed like 6 or 7 deer when I was a kid before I ever killed one. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it is what it is. I want to talk about one of the reasons that I guess you haven't been on is because like you just started hunting, but you're not like not an outdoorsman. You're like a hardcore canoe guy. I want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
So like what is kind of your like journey or upbringing, I guess, in the outdoors?
Okay. Well, I think, as a kid, my dad didn't really do a lot of outdoor stuff, but there was a guy in our neighborhood that took me down the Cabo River when I was like 12 years old. And from there, I just started canoeing and fishing the Cabo River and just loving being out there. And, that's what I've done. I've done a lot of canoeing, long distance trips, overnight camping, fishing, been to, other states paddling. And then I started getting into whitewater paddling. And eventually, a couple of years ago, I paddled the entire Cabo River. And then I paddled the entire Tallapoosa all in one trip. And, the adventure of it is what attracts me. Just being outdoors and, you run into storms and just the challenge.
Adversity.
Yeah, adversity, the challenge of it. And so I think that's one thing that attracts me about hunting as well.
Yeah. Dude, I'm getting a little bit off subject here, but like me and Jacob have this mountain hunt coming up, and when we scouted for it the other day, I sent you the track. We did 8 miles, 1,200 vertical feet, and it was like some pretty rough stuff. It wasn't terrible, but I mean, some of it was pretty rough, and we were talking about bringing you out there to get you like a change of scenery from the hunting club and like go see some different sign, hunt some different woods. And whenever we talk about bringing someone on a trip like that, we're like, man, like, can they hang? Like, can they do it? Because sometimes like you bring people and like that's just too much, like a hunt like that. But I was like, no, Mike's always down to suffer. Like,
yeah, I can handle it. That Tallapoosa canoe trip, I mean, I paddled 42 miles in one day, paddled till midnight because I couldn't get out of the river because the banks were so high, and ended up sleeping on my canoe on a gravel bar after throwing up from exhaustion. So I can handle some suffering. I can handle some suffering.
But by the way, how long was that trip in the Cahaba trip?
The Cabo trip was 185 miles, and it took me 9 days. And the Tallapoosa trip, I pushed it a little bit harder. It's 250 miles from, near Tallapoosa, Georgia, all the way down the Alabama River, and I did that in 10 days. So
you went from Georgia to like Montgomery, right?
Yeah, to near Wetumpka, yeah.
And you had to, and what's kind of brutal about that is like how many lakes you had to go through.
Yeah, that
I
was
love
brutal.
canoeing. I like floating down a river.
Well, that's why I enjoyed the Cabo trip a lot more, because it's
Yeah.
more of a free flowing river, and But the Tallapoosa, I had to paddle through Wadowee and Lake Martin, and my hands were so jacked up from paddling. By the time I got to the Lake Martin Dam, and I still had 2 more lakes to go through.
Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah. So,
Well,
but it was an adventure.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something me and you connected over too. Like when you became my stepdad, was I grew up on the Cahaba also.
Right.
And so that's something that we kind of shared. But you didn't get into actual hunting until you got a dog, right?
Yeah, until, I didn't even really want a dog, but your mom did. And I was like, well, we're going to get one that can go canoeing with me and go on adventures with me. And then Andrew suggested a small Munsterlander. And so that's what I did the research. It was a good house dog. It was a good versatile dog. I thought that'd be perfect size for the canoe. But then you get a bird dog, and what do you got to do with it?
You got to go bird hunting, man.
Yeah, and so that kind of sucked me into it a little bit. And then, I enjoyed it so much and started listening to y'all's podcast and just like, man, that sounds like, fun adventure to go and more learning, because I like to learn new stuff. And, so here I am. And then also I'm like, I'm getting up there. I need to do as much stuff as I can.
Yeah.
Before I'm too old to do it.
Yeah, definitely. So, you started out with the bird hunting stuff, and then we took you on your first deer hunts last year. And, I want to talk about the first deer hunt, because from my perspective, we get out of the truck. I was like, I'm just going to take him to a food plot. It's going to be easy.
On the hunting club.
Yeah, on the hunting club. You weren't a member of the club yet.
Right.
I was like, you just come out there with me. Like, we just got your camo. Like, you just got a gun. And I'm like, we're just going to go sit this food plot, and that'll be a good introductory. This is like the first time. And we round the corner to go to the food plot, and there's 4 does in it. I'm like, Mike is about to kill a deer 3 minutes into his first hunt. And so, adrenaline spike. And they're still we spot them at 350 or something, because they're on a power line.
350 what?
Yards. 350 miles.
Oh, eagle eye over here.
350 inches. So we started easing down there and crawling up on them, and we got to a point where it was kind of a far shot, but I'm like, I don't really know if we can get any further. What was your perspective on that whole hunt?
Well, it's to me, I hadn't shot a lot of deer rifles, and I'm still trying to get an idea of how steady you need to be and stuff like that. And I had your backpack and my rifle.
Oh yeah.
Up on it, but it was still I couldn't get a shot on them, and so I lifted it up on its side to get the gun a little bit higher. And when I shot, I don't know if I just pulled through and was steady enough, or the pack fell over or what, but I missed.
Yep. She just stood there too. I was watching through the binos, and I saw that bullet splash 1.5 foot over her back. I was like, ah.
And so and then I didn't, and I don't have that muscle memory to know to chamber another one.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I was like, rack another, because she just stood there.
Because
like,
I was just
that?
looking at it. It's like, dang it, I missed it.
Yep. Oh man. So that was a little too easy. And then there was a couple other hunts last year. We took you out there on New Year's. Did you just hunt food plots last year?
I hunted at the end of the year, the last day of hunting season. I think we went out there and I hunted a road from the ground because I didn't have the capability to get in a tree or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah. So we went a couple times, and this would be a good conversation about the hunting club and how things are going on the club, because the contrast between last year and this year is pretty stark. Because I mean, you had the hunt, that first hunt where you missed a doe, and did you see another deer after that?
No. But I enjoyed sitting in the shooting houses and looking out at the field.
You're like, man, that grass is really green. It's really pretty. Jacob, you got anything?
Yeah, it's sitting there looking at your front yard, just nice little mowed down, food plot, because deer hammer it, but they're not hitting it until dark. And but yeah, no, I think it's kind of funny. But also, I'll mention this. So, Mike, I've shot your rifle before. It has one of the most god awful triggers I've ever seen on a gun.
Oh, really?
When it comes to, and this is why I kind of go back to you shooting like that. It was hard for me to shoot accurately. And I shoot a good bit and shoot a bunch of different rifles.
but like that trigger's so stiff. Like I'd love to put a scale on it. It's probably, if I had to guess, 9.5, almost 10-pound trigger. And it's so stiff that it's hard to like focus and get that shot to break cleanly because you're so focused. Like I got to get this trigger pulled all the way back. And I think that definitely hurts a little bit with you, especially being a little bit newer shooter. That's one of the reasons why I've told Andrew before in the past. I'm like, you need to let Mike use your gun. Let him experience that a little bit. Experience a little bit lighter trigger.
Dude, if you want a light trigger, I got that 7 mag in there. Now she gonna kick a little bit. She's kind of mean, but dude, that trigger is like you look at it funny and it goes. Anyways, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that helps a ton. Especially like I wouldn't want like a crazy like a under 2.5-pound trigger for someone new shooting, because like you want to be able to feel the trigger and like make sure everything's steady while you're like pulling through. You don't want it the second you touch the trigger it goes off.
Right.
Like Anthony, my uncle, has a gun like that. His 7 mag, and it is crazy light. I think he's measured his like 1 3/4 pounds. He had like a crazy trigger job done to it.
Mine's 2 pounds.
Yeah, and that's super light. But like something that's around 4 to 5 pounds. Something that's like you have to be distinct enough to like make sure you're pulling the trigger, but it breaks super clean for you, will help out tremendously of like just focusing on the target, and you're not focusing on like I've got to pull this trigger all the way back and for it to go off.
Right.
So I think that would help tremendously. But we're now in gun season here in Alabama, and we've had some other kind of close encounters with you. We mentioned this on the podcast because we give Mike updates without having you on and about like all these close calls during bow season and all that kind of stuff. But one thing we haven't talked about is you had another encounter with a buck. Was it last week? This past Saturday?
Yeah, you're getting way ahead here, dude.
Oh.
We gotta back it up a little bit.
Okay.
We got time. Another thing too, by the way, like you also, so you got into it through the bird hunting, but also just like small game in general. So like, I think we did a little bit of like upland hunting. But you went and jump shot ducks last year on a SOA hunt here in Alabama, right? And that was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like that was your first like really successful hunting experience, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that was, I've gone out with you guys a couple of times and, killed a woodcock and I killed a goose on the Caba and, some stuff like that. But with that SOA hunt, I had, that hunt, nobody else was really available to go. So I just took Angus, my dog, with me and never hunted ducks, never shot ducks, and went out there and figured it out, and I was like the only person in that hunt that killed anything.
Yeah.
And I, so I felt like I did a pretty good job figuring it out.
That was awesome. I was where were we on our SOA hunt?
I think,
you were. You were on your SA.
Yeah, we were on our deer hunt, and I remember getting the text. We were in the tree. You sent me a text of Angus with those 2 ducks, and I was just like, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I was so fired up. So, so that kind of got you started, which we got a picture of Angus right here on the table. So that kind of got you started. And then this year, like we did a lot of prep before the season. We got you a bow. We got it tuned up. We got you a climber. Got you climbing trees. So you were like kind of ready to roll. And then bow season rolled around, and you were like hot and heavy going right into bow season. So, what was that like? What was that like anticipation like getting into the season?
It was interesting, and Jacob took me out to my first tree and helped me get started up the tree.
Oh yeah,
in the dark, and sat there, that whole morning and didn't see anything, and then it was like, man, it's just gonna be like last year. And then that afternoon, put me over there in a spot where, I had some does come in, and I was like, man, there are deer out here. And ended up taking a shot on one of those and missed, of course.
Of course.
I haven't killed one yet,
That's
right?
true.
So all my shots are misses so far.
So you whiffed on a doe, and yeah, I remember because you didn't take. See, like Mike is real low key in our group messages because we'll always do a group message when we're hunting with people, and it was like me and you and Thomas, like it was us 3 and your brother Thomas, Jacob, and we're like texting, we're like, oh, this and that, I saw this, I saw that. Mike doesn't say anything.
Yeah, it was like, is Mike dead? Like, where's Mike at?
And then we get back to the check station, and you're like, I don't know what you did. You like held up the arrow or something. I'm like, no way, because I just saw like a deployed broadhead, and I'm like, I thought you killed it. I thought you killed one.
No. Yeah, so the only reason I'm quiet is 'cause I'm sitting there going, looking around, trying not to move because I want a deer to come in.
Yeah, he was telling me about that the other day. I'm like, Mike sounds so much more focused than me. Man, I was in the stand the other day watching the freaking football game on my phone and everything, and I look over, I'm like, oh crap, there's a doe at 8 yards.
Yeah, I'm up there just, hear a squirrel. I'm like, what's that? Is that a deer? Yeah, what's that sound?
Getting tuned up.
Yeah. So I'm learning new sounds out there,
Oh, you will learn eventually. It'll take a while, but you will learn the difference between like a squirrel and a deer, where you can tell if it's a squirrel and not a deer. But what still gets me is a freaking armadillo, because armadillos are so loud. They're like the loudest animal in the woods, and you're like, that is a deer for sure. Because deer are pretty loud too. Like if you can actually hear them, if they're not being all quiet coming in. So you had that. You had a opening morning. You had a miss. What after that? I can't. I'm trying to remember now.
You went and hunted the creek in the spot that I'd found some white oaks, but you saw on the other side of the creek. I think you said you had some more encounters over there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think on that day what I did.
Back behind Ronnie's field.
Yeah, so I got on you're talking about the opening day of gun season?
No. This is still in bow season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back behind Ronnie's field where we jump shot the other day.
Oh yeah, so I went back out there, behind Ronnie's field, and
we call it Ronnie's field because there's a guy in our hunting club who hunts that field a lot.
Yeah. So anyway, I went out there and was in the dark trying to find a tree, and found, was looking for some sign and stuff like that, and I was like, well, I think this area looks good because it was like a little dry creek, meander, and there was a bunch of tracks in there. So there was a bunch of trees in there that I couldn't get in, and there was this one tree, and about 12 foot up, it kind of curved like that, and so I was like, well, I guess I'm going to get in that tree, and climbed up there, and I got part way up and look over, and there's a doe, across the creek, to my south, and then I'm sitting there looking at my bow down there, and so I went ahead and just climbed up the tree, and the doe he didn't see me because I was on the opposite side of the tree, but he just kind of went off in another direction, and then a little bit later, that a couple hours later, a doe comes out on the other side of the creek, and to my east, and they were too far to shoot. They're about 40 yards out. So that was my next experience. And then it was a few weeks later that I was out there in that spot where I saw the doe the first time, and I had a doe come in there that I shot at and missed.
Yeah, and that's something that me and Jacob were actually talking about, because like you're still so new at it that there's like certain things that I think that maybe we take for granted a little bit, of when is it okay to draw back, or
Right.
like, can you draw back if she's looking at you, or like what's the situation, or like looking over your gun instead of down the barrel of your gun before you're ready to shoot. That's another thing. Like when me and you squirrel hunted last year, I noticed that like you would be like aiming at the squirrel, but you'd be like down on the gun, like looking through your sights, but you weren't ready to shoot yet, and you were having trouble finding the squirrel. And I was like, hey, find the squirrel and then bring the gun up to your eye, and like little stuff like that like you just have to learn. I mean, it just takes time.
That's it's like over the last couple of years, I've learned a lot of little stuff like that, and I'm getting better. But like with that doe on that time, I wasn't ready. The doe came into view like 10 yards from me, and I was like, my bow wasn't drawn, and then I started to do it, and she looked up at me, and I just froze,
Yeah.
And you were saying I should have just gone ahead and drawn back at that point.
Me?
Because
Yeah.
as soon as she looked down, I drew back, but then she moved out of sight. And there was just a small little window for me to shoot her, and I shot and missed.
Yeah. Sometimes, man, I don't know. Like it just depends on the situation. Sometimes there's like nothing you can do, but like if she busts me and she's like all the way in my shooting lane and everything, and she's like kind of looking at me, I'll just go ahead and just follow through and draw. Like, have you done that, Jacob? Like, does that work for you? Because if I halfway draw, or if she catches me drawing and I stop, then I'm screwed.
Yeah.
But if she catches me drawing and I just keep drawing, then I usually end up getting a shot off, if that makes sense. I don't know if I guess she didn't see you before you drew, but
Yeah, no, I haven't drawn through when one's like dead eye looking right at me, especially like quarter two. But it seems like if they think they see you, and what I've had experience with is like if they look up there and they're like, there's something wrong with that tree, they'll put their head down a lot of times and they'll start to turn to move away. And if you draw, then sometimes, especially if they're not walking directly away from you, you can get a shot angle. Like the second they kind of turn, they kind of get away from your tree. But I've never just kept drawing on one that was like right there looking at me. Most time it's like they kind of look up and then when they start looking around, because sometimes they look up and they start looking around like, is there anything else around me? You can draw then and catch them off guard a little bit. Like one of the deer I shot in Tennessee a couple years ago was just like that. Like they came in, group of does came in opening day. Well, I was hunting some public and I didn't see them because they came through some stuff and it was real thick stuff. I didn't know they were there until like 15 yards from me. I was like, oh crap. So I was like trying to stand up because I was sitting in a little mobile lock on, and trying to get myself situated. Had my bow in my hand, and when the lead doe popped out, she didn't look up at me, but she knew something was wrong because I had walked to that point and decided there wasn't a good tree there, so I backtracked back to the tree I climbed, and she caught my ground scent. And then as she was like looking around, she like happened to look away from me. That's when I drew the bow, and then she stepped out and started walking, kind of quartering back the way they came, and I was able to shot and kill her. But yeah, it's a challenge, especially on a doe. A lot of people talk about like mature bucks, of like how wary a mature buck is, but a mature doe, especially you get like a 5-6 year old doe, dude, they are so well keen on their surroundings, because doe home ranges, like the area that a doe will live in throughout a year, are a lot smaller than what a buck will use, because they don't really travel for the rut or anything like that. So they know everything in that general area. And I swear there's sometimes you'll catch a doe come through and she like knows for sure like something is wrong in this situation, like looks up at the tree. That wasn't here yesterday when I walked through this spot, and they're just like way more wary.
dude, that happened to me the other day. That video I sent you.
Yeah,
The hunt we're about to talk about, man. Like this, I was so far up this freaking pine tree, and she was in the thickest stuff ever. And I have it on video. She's just like, looks straight up in the tree at me. I'm like, are you kidding me? And then she blew at me 50 times. And I was like, well, thanks, honey. Yeah, if she blows, she goes.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that kind of brings us to the buck encounters you had. So we told the story on the podcast before, but like I went into this area. Me and you had ran cameras in there all summer, and I had basically scouted. I'd pushed into an area that we hadn't been to before. There's kind of a part of the property that all these deer are hanging out in, and I pushed in there just to scout it on the first day of like a cold front. It was like really windy, so I'm like, I think I can slip in there. Found all these rubs, fresh rubs, which there is like no buck sign on this club. Like you just go walk around in places you think you'd find buck sign, there's like no buck sign. It's like a really weird place. And so when I found that, I'm like, okay, this should be really good. And so that afternoon we were talking about where to go, and I was like, Mike, why don't you go in there and I'm going to swing around and go here. And then that was the day you had the encounter. So let's talk about that a little bit. How did that go down?
Well, I got up in there, and I haven't had any buck encounters really.
You haven't seen like a rack buck in the woods yet, have you?
Well, I had, just from work. I work outdoors some, and I've run into some, in the past, but not hunting.
Yeah.
And not as close as these were. And so I was just up in the tree, and you've told me, like that last hour of shooting light is the best time, and so I got real focused right there, and was just really listening out, and there had been a lot of squirrels and just a lot of stuff going on all around the whole time. And I was sitting there, and I started to hear something up on the ridge, and I look up. It's about 5:30 in the afternoon. This is before daylight savings, and the sun was shining right on the top of the ridge, and I just see this white rack coming, and I was like, is that really what I'm think it is? And I was like, that's a big deer. And then it was like eye level with me. It was coming right towards me. So I just, I couldn't do anything. And it was about, I guess, 40 yards away. And then I see something else behind. I see another rack behind it. And it turns, and I still can't draw because there's another big deer. and then it turns, and it's kind of quartering away from me. And there's another one. It ended up being 5 bucks, 2 spikes and 3 really good deer. And there was an area where they're going to be about 25 yards from me over here where it was a big white oak. And that's where the Big 10 stopped. And
he was the lead deer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the lead deer. And then there was an 8-point and then a big 6-point in those 2 spikes. And I was like drawn back for a little while and just like, bow is shaking, and I'm like leaning up against the tree to try to get steady. And the deer was stopped to where I could see, right behind here and back. And there's a sparkleberry bush there. And, I aimed and shot and thought I had a good shot, but obviously my arrow hit a branch or something.
Well, I wanted you to go back, and you had texted or maybe called. You texted us that you think you shot one or something like that, and I think Andrew called you and asked like, what did the shot sound like?
Right.
And you said something that was
it sounded like it whacked. It sounded like a whack sound.
Well,
yeah.
You mentioned it didn't sound like I hit the ground.
No, I didn't hit the ground. I know I didn't hit the ground because I know what that sounds like. Exactly. Yeah, so it didn't sound like it hit dirt and leaves. So I was thinking, I thought for sure I hit it, but I wasn't very confident. But then listening to Andrew talk about, maybe you did based on the sound, it got me kind of excited. But even then, when I thought I'd hit it, I was up there just like the adrenaline was going. The adrenaline was going seeing something like that, for the first time in your life, and you got a shot on it like that, So it was like it's my best, most epic hunting experience. And I didn't even kill anything, So
yeah, no, that was awesome, and that was right before we went to Arkansas. So that was like early November, and like I said, that might sound weird to some people that you had a bachelor group in front of you, but right now it's December 5th, and they're still not rutting here. So we're still a couple weeks out from the rut. So they were still bachelored up, and pretty much that bachelor group that we were getting on camera all summer is what showed up right there, which like I didn't expect because like I still don't have a lot of experience in this area. And when you said that you saw 5 bucks, I was like, whoa, okay. Like I was thinking that you were going to see like some does and a buck might come through there, because there were some fresh rubs, and that's not something you see on the club very often. And that also just makes me think about this club, man. It's like there's a bachelor group in there. They're all hard-horned. They're all working the area, and it's just still not like the amount of sign that I find like anywhere else that I go.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's one reason I want to get you to a different area that is like just a different feel, because I think it'll be good to like kind of branch out. Because I mean I don't know what the deal is.
That property is one of the most depressing properties to scout because you just don't find much bucks on it.
No, you don't.
Rubs, scrapes, you just don't find much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange, but so that like we went over there, and of course, we already told the story on the podcast, but you ended up hitting a limb or something, and weren't able to get that deer. And fast forward like a couple weeks, so gun season opens, and you were seeing deer almost every hunt in bow season, weren't you?
Yeah, it was like out of 7 hunts, I saw deer 4 times or something like that. So it's pretty good.
Yeah,
and then good. Open day gun season, what does Andrew do to you?
He, I don't think he meant to gar hole me.
The gar hole daddy himself.
No, I don't think that. I mean, I think if I really wanted to go to that spot, he would have let me go to it. But
yeah, so that's another situation. So like, truth be told, what I've been doing
Is garholing you this whole time.
I'll be like, Mike has to
No,
suffer some
he's
more.
trying to help me be successful.
So
I think.
what I've been doing is I have been picking. This is why I like hunting.
Picking 2 spots and let me pick one of them.
Yeah, 2 or 3 spots, and I will tell you whether or not I think like what is the best spot. So like the day that you missed the 10 point, I was like, that is the best spot. And me and Jacob went to like a kind of an unproven spot, but it was a spot that I thought would be really good. I think it is a really good spot. I think we need to go back there. But so like I'll say, okay, these 2 spots, this is probably the better one. Do you want to go there? And so opening day of gun season,
I chose something different.
I had a couple spots in mind for me and you and Sam.
Greedy.
And and Sam got there late, and so Sam and Blakely ended up hunting like a food plot or something.
Right.
But me and you were there, and I was like, okay, there's this spot and this spot. I really don't know which one's going to be better, but which one do you want? And you chose,
The creek.
yeah, you chose going low, and I chose something else.
Yeah.
And it got to be almost dark, and that first buck came out. I was like, son of a gun.
And it's like I heard kapow from over the ridge on the other side. I'm like, no, I think it's opening day. Andrew didn't get him another one, did he? You got one opening day
Yeah,
of bow
and then
season
Sam
and
texted-
got season. at the
Every
hunting
gunshot
camp.
that we heard, Sam was like, was that one of y'all? Was that one of y'all? And then that one, he's like, okay, that had to be one of y'all. Because I think I told Sam, I'm like, hey, if one of us shoots, you're going to know if,
Yeah.
if it was one of us. But yeah, that was that situation that day. And actually, same thing on this last hunt, which we'll talk about this one before we kind of move on. This last hunt was the same thing. We had 2 different areas that I thought was going to be really good. I really didn't know which one would be better, especially as far as just trying to kill a doe. And I actually thought that you were in the better spot that day too. So I let you choose, and you ended up choosing going back to where you missed the 10 point. So nobody's hunted it since you missed that 10 point back in early November. So now we choose to, there's this other spot that we haven't really hunted yet, and then we got the 10-point spot, and you chose a 10-point spot. I'm like, okay, he's in the good spot. I go to the other area, and I end up seeing 2 does, like really early in the afternoon. It was like 3 o'clock, and those 2 does came through. And when I saw those does, I was like, gosh, dang it, man. Because I was like, Mike should have come here because she walked into like 12 feet, before she busted me. I mean, I could have shot her before she got to that spot. But I was like, dang it, man, Mike should have come here. And again, Mike, radio silent the whole time. Outside we were texting about some gunshots that we heard, but didn't say anything. And then you call. So talk about this hunt, because I didn't know what you saw during the hunt until afterwards.
Okay, yeah. So this time, last time I was there was a lot of squirrels and a lot of activity going around. This time it was like dead silent, and it had rained earlier. And, I just, sat up there, and I kind of felt like I wasn't going to see anything. But around 4:40, I start hearing something off to the north. It starts coming down. I could tell it's a stick break. I was like, that's got to be a deer.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm sitting there looking in that direction, and, I have my gun ready. I stand up, and all of a sudden I see, rack coming into view, and it was very brief. But I pulled up and had my scope out, and I could see him in my scope, and then he was gone. Before I could really get a good aim on him and shoot. But it was either a 6-point or an 8-point, but it looked like a really good deer. I mean, I knew immediately I was going to shoot, a small buck anyway, but I knew this one was definitely going to be a good deer. So I don't know which one it was, but it may have been one of the ones we've been catching on camera.
Yeah, I don't know what deer it was either, but I was relieved to hear you say that, because I'm like, yes, okay, Mike saw something. I didn't take the good spot, and you saw a buck. So
yeah, I know. So anytime if I just seeing a buck, to me that was a great hunt for me, and I want to kill one, of course, but it's just I can't explain it, but just sitting out there and getting to see something like that,
Yeah,
pretty cool.
getting to see a buck in the woods, man.
Yeah.
There's something special about it.
Yep.
For real.
So,
Did you hear any turkeys that day, by the way?
no turkeys.
No turkeys. Man, those turkeys have been on the roads lately out there. I mean, we getting this rain, and oh my gosh, it's getting me a little bit fired up. I'm not gonna lie for the spring, but so yeah, you were able to see that deer. Unfortunately, weren't able to get a shot, but
No.
that's part of it. Especially when you're hunting in an area like that's as thick as that, and being able to see through the woods. Like a lot of times you could see a deer, but you might not always get to shoot it.
Right.
And he just got past you so fast. But the fact that they're still using that bedding area makes me feel really good. And one thing I wanted to talk about is just the difference between, last year and this year as far as you got the climber and you're able to actually get off the food plots, get off the obvious spots like the power lines and roads and everything, and you're able to get in the woods and actually hunt. And your ratio of what you've been seeing has just like gone through the roof.
That's right.
So like what I mean, what's that like? I don't know, I guess just from like a beginner standpoint, going from, we went on the work day, we were hanging out with everybody, they're talking about their ladder stands and their food plots and everything, and then basically just going around them and just literally hunting the cover that they're looking at, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's like I'm an older guy and I'm just getting into hunting. I've got a short time. I've got to have a fast learning curve,
Yeah.
But I've got these two guys here, so I mean, I'm blessed to have that. But you know, it's easy to see, that people get in this rut of just sitting out in a green field and waiting for, a buck that's only going to come out at night in the green field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen a lot of deer this year, and it's only December, and so I don't know. I just feel like getting up in a tree and learning some of the stuff I've learned from you guys and from listening to the podcast. I mean, it's just, put me in a position to where I've got opportunities. I just got to seal the deal next.
Oh yeah.
Mike, I got a question for you. What's one of the biggest things you felt like you've learned that you didn't think was as important or wasn't even something on your radar before you actually started deer hunting?
That's a tough one. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I mean, from the very start, probably I didn't know how important knowing what trees are and what deer feed on, and stuff like that. Just don't, if you're not a hunter, you don't even think about that stuff. I've been out in the woods, camping and canoeing and exploring, and just not even cared what. There's pine trees and there's oak trees and
Yeah.
and that's it. There's sycamores and those that are obvious. And so anyway, that's just learning that kind of stuff, what deer feed on. And then I didn't know anything about what a scrape was or a rub or anything like that. What deer sign was. I was tramping probably all through deer sign my whole life and never really paid attention to it. And
Yeah.
so just the basics, really. There's a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, and I actually like what you said about the thing about the trees and like feed and everything, because I mean, when you get right down to it, I think that's one of the main factors that differentiates like you or us from all those other guys in the club is like the reason they hunt those food plots so much is one, because they're easy, but also two, because like they don't know that stuff, like they might know what a white oak is, but all the other things like the browse species that are on the ground or other kind of oak trees that might be producing, like they might not know that, and so they don't really, like if they were to just strike off into the woods and try to find a spot closer to where the deer are coming from, they don't really know what to look for.
Right.
And some of the guys in the club will joke about that. We'll be at the camp house or whatever, and there was one guy talking about somebody in the club who still hunts the food plots a lot, but he gets off the food plot some. And, like, I know where at least a lot of his blinds are, and they're not in, like, tough spots or like, very strategic spots or anything. But this guy's like, man, that guy gets so far in the woods, he's just as bad as the deer are. And I'm like, He's like, his blinds are like on logging decks and
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like, man, he ain't even like really out like in the woods.
Right.
But that's kind of the mindset of these guys, and that's why I think with like a relatively quick turnaround from last year to this year, we're able to just bam get on the bucks and like get a lot of opportunities at them so far. Like I've killed one, you've had 2 opportunities so far, and that's not even counting all the opportunities we've had at does.
Right.
Which some of the guys in the club are complaining about. They haven't killed a deer out there in like 7 years of being a member.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, sitting out there last year on those green fields and looking at them, you wouldn't think there's a lot of deer in there, but you go to where the deer are, and then you realize there's some deer in there.
yeah, and we and another thing too is like, man, we had gun season come in, and you had several back-to-back hunts where you didn't see anything,
Right.
and so I was like, man, I hope we don't get burned out, because like that can
No,
happen.
I won't get burnt. You know me, I've got adversity. I can handle it.
That's right. Mike's always down to suffer. And so but to break it up, I was like, hey, duck season came in, and that's something we were looking forward to.
That really did help.
Because we were looking forward to that since like, I don't know, October or something.
Right. Yep.
And when we saw the dates of the duck hunt and everything, we're like, man, we're gonna go jump shoot, because we've been seeing so many freaking ducks on this property.
I've been sitting in a tree next to that creek watching wood ducks, all day
Swim
long,
around all day.
wishing I could shoot one.
Yeah, so we went in there and we both limited like real quick,
Right.
and we're able to scout while we were doing it, and you actually put a camera out.
Yeah, I put a camera out Sunday. Was gonna hunt and then didn't feel good about those 2 areas and decided just to sleep in, and then went out there and scouted a little bit along, in the area, and found a scrape.
Yep.
Found my first scrape all by myself without Andrew there scouting with me. But and there was a licking branch there, and set a camera up. I haven't got anything on it, but I don't know if my camera sent me a couple of photos of me, and that's it. And I've tried to get it forced send me a photo, but it won't. So I don't know if there's something wrong with the camera, if there's just nothing on it yet.
Yeah. So I don't know. I was excited to hear you found that scrape though. So just gotta give it time. They'll start showing up, especially over these next 2 or 3 weeks with how the rut falls. Those scrapes should like really start to ramp up here within 2 or 3 weeks. So we're kind of just now getting all of our cameras back out there, because a lot of my cameras were in Arkansas. And so now I'm like kind of slowly putting them back out, and we're getting your cameras back out, because we ended up pulling them because someone messed with our cameras. So we ended up pulling all of them. And so now we're just getting them back out. So now we're trying to focus on more rut specific stuff. So scrapes, possibly like trails that go through funnels, which we haven't really found one of those yet. But I think we've put like 3 or 4 cameras down on scrapes now, and already had a new buck show up on one of them. So real excited.
Yeah.
Real excited.
Yeah, and that deer that just showed up when I saw that photo. I guess that was this morning. I'm like, dude, that's an impressive looking deer. Like real heavy mass, but he's like it looks like he's tight framed, like just an 8-point or something.
Yeah,
like
and
that.
he's just right in front of the camera, and he never like turns, so you just see his profile. I mean, he looks like a good deer. I want to get more. I wish you could download a video, but you can't on that specific kind of cell camera.
Which cell camera is that?
It's a Bushnell.
It's that Bush. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you got to go to pull the card in order to get that.
Yeah, so you actually got to pull the card. But yeah, that's a brand new spot I scouted that I have never been to on the club. Walked it, hit the edge, walked the edge of the thick stuff, found a scrape, put a camera on it, got a doe the next day. 2 or 3 days later, that buck came through. So going pretty good so far.
Yeah.
Pretty good so far. And then me and you went and put one of your cameras on a scrape the other day.
Right.
That we haven't checked yet. We'll probably check that one like closer to Christmas. I'm really eager to see what shows up on that one. So
Non-cellular.
yeah, it's just a Browning camera. But I don't know. We're still like you said the other day, we're kind of still like casing the place out a little bit, because we've got this little nucleus of buck activity on one part of the property that we're really focusing on. But I don't really know what's on the rest of the property.
Yeah.
Like we haven't. It's 1,800 acres, so we haven't really covered a ton of ground yet.
Right.
So there's no telling what else might be out there. I'm really excited to see what else, because I see the deer that are getting killed in the neighborhood on the properties around us. There was a guy in the club across the street that killed a really nice deer the other day, really big buck. And I'm like, okay. I mean, they're here. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's more, because we got 2 or 3 nice ones on our part of the property that we've been hunting, but I think that there's probably more, dispersed throughout the property that we just haven't found yet.
Right.
And on those, if you find those really good scrapes right now, I'm telling you, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will know what is on, at least what's coming through there pretty often, for the most part. I mean, there's always going to be some that slip through the cracks, but we're going to get some good buck inventory, and hopefully we can use it this year, but also scouting all these things that we're not really hunting right now, like where we put your Browning camera.
Right.
That's probably going to be something that we use next year. Like, let's just say that there's a big buck that shows up. Maybe we get to go in there and kill him this year. If not, we'll probably get a crack at him next year, just from what we learned this year.
Right.
So it's like a snowball. You just got a snowball going downhill. But anyways, Jacob, you got anything else to add?
I was going to ask you, what do you know about snowballs living in Alabama?
I don't know nothing about snowballs, man. I know about the snowpocalypse of 2014. That's about it.
Yeah.
And then Mike knows about the blizzard of '93 or whatever.
Yeah,
it was.
blizzard of '93. You lived through that.
Man, I bet you could have went out and tracked deer like crazy back then. I wasn't around for that one.
Yeah, no. No, I mean, other than that, this is kind of exciting. Like, again, hopefully this is going to be some good luck for you, Mike, so you can go out there next couple weeks and kill you a buck, or just kill you a doe. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then get you back in the podcast. But it is exciting to kind of see someone like yourself who like didn't grow up with a hunting background, nothing like that, now getting interested into it and like learning as you're going.
Right.
And like, and we've mentioned this a bunch of times, but it's like, it feels like you have like a bunch of failures, but all of these quote unquote failures where maybe you don't have the success of actually killing a deer, but you have all these encounters is what's going to help you be able to execute in the future.
That's right.
Because it's like, it's one of the toughest things I've seen. And I saw an article about this, about like with youth hunters, is youth hunters having it too easy when it comes to like their first couple times hunting, because someone might take them out to a corn pile or something like that, shoot their first deer, and they don't really learn anything. They just like learn just how to pull the trigger on a deer. But like with all these experiences you're having, that's going to compound year over year to figure out what to do in certain situations. Because like, me and Andrew are like this. Probably a lot of listeners are like this, and viewers as well. Like when you've hunted for a while, you kind of get a gut feeling about different situations and how to handle it. When you start out, you don't have any of that.
That's right.
There's no gut feelings. There's no instinct. It's just like, now, well, crap, well, that didn't work. Well, I'm not going to do that next time. And it's like you kind of learn what not to do. And sooner or later, you're going to figure out what works for you. And then, like, when you finally kill one, you got to remember, go back and ask yourself, why? Why was I able to kill that deer? How was I able to execute the shot? Execute, if you climbed a tree, get in quietly, and all these, like, small things that you've done. You need to remember, always ask yourself after every hunt, especially if you have an encounter, well, why did I see that deer? Why do you think that deer came down off that ridge and dropped down below you into the valley? Or why did that deer bust me or whatever? And that's how you start figuring out how wind shifts in different areas, how thermals work, and all these other kind of things by asking yourself why. And if you don't know the answer, then you ask somebody like Andrew or myself or somebody else of like, hey, I had this situation. I don't know what happened. Based off how I'm telling you what I experienced, what should I have done in that situation? I think the more people in general will start doing that, you're going to quickly overcome a lot of those hurdles and start having success, and then having repeatable success.
Yeah. I do feel like I'm on a fast track compared to probably a lot of hunters. And that's what I kind of wanted to be on. I wanted, take in as much information as I can and have all those experiences as quickly as I can. And, so I can learn and have that kind of success that I want to, have. So
Yeah.
I feel like, without you guys, I wouldn't have been seeing all these deer, I wouldn't have been in this position. It'd take me a lot longer.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why we do the podcast, honestly, because it's like it's a new form of media, but it's a new resource that did not exist, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Basically, especially for Southern hunters, because like I didn't have it growing up, and so like this would be a huge asset, and like getting a gut feeling about stuff. Like I relate it back to floating the Cahaba River, because like I didn't have like a mentor to do that. Like my dad never really did that. I think I canoed once with him. and he wasn't even really a big fisherman anyways, and so I like had to learn from scratch, and it's like developing a gut feeling. It's like, man, after floating the river so many times and just doing stuff, it's like I got to a point where if I'm floating down the Cahaba River and I go down through a shoal and there's like a little eddy on the side and deeper water with some slack water and I throw a white spinnerbait in it, I will catch a bass. Like you get that gut feeling, you know?
Right.
And it'll be that same way with deer, like after you get some experience. Like you just kind of get a feeling about a spot. And like that spot with the 10 point is kind of like that for me. Like when I walked in there, I'm like, sometimes it's just like, I don't know, this feels kind of bucky, you know? Like after you see bucks in an area, after a while, you're just like, you kind of get a feeling. And like we had some stuff like that the other day. Me and Jacob were scouting in an area.
Oh, Andrew realized how good of a nose I have.
Yeah, honestly, I was very impressed. The first time, you didn't smell them the first time, but we were walking through an area and like we kind of stopped. We're being real quiet. And Jacob's like, hey, do you have one rack? I'm like, yeah. We're carrying our rifles. And he's like, I would carry your gun like in your hand, not on your shoulder. I'm like, okay. We take 2 steps. 3 deer jump up and run off. I'm like, hey, that's pretty good.
Oh, wow.
And then we get further up, and Jacob, like, he's like freaking winding something. He's like throwing that nose up. He's smelling. And he's like, I smell deer. And, dude, we bumped a deer that was like 75 yards through the woods. I'm like, holy crap, dude. Like, I was impressed.
Yeah, and some people don't understand that. Like,
well, bloodhound over here.
No, but like, because some people hear it and like, oh, it's complete BS. And I think, you know, everybody's a little bit different. But like, if you're in and around like a bed, like bedding area that deer are using all the time, even like does. Like, I was hunting a spot in Tennessee one time where I parked below this ridge point and the thermals were like dropping, and you could just smell deer. Like not tarsal glands, like you just smell deer, like the deer dander, and just like all their beds and everything. And like there were deer 100% bedded up there. And I swung around and shot does coming out of that spot off that little ridge point. But that happens all the time. Like I've gone into situations where like Andrew doesn't. Like if it's a buck or something, you got a lot of tarsal glands and stank. Andrew's all, yeah, I smell them. But
I don't smell them until I get like up on them though.
But see, I had a hunt in another part of Alabama a couple weeks ago. Or actually, no, crap, that was a month ago now. It was well before we went to Arkansas. And I climbed up this tree and it was about to start raining and I was trying to like see how it looked so I was going to come back in the next morning. And while I'm up in the tree, I'm like, I 100% smell a buck. Like 100% smell a buck. And like the wind was swirling. So the wind's like going like round and around. It's not just coming from one direction. And I'm like, it's got to be right behind me because there's some real thick cover right behind me. And I turn around, I'm like, look, I'm like, that deer's super close. I had my gun with me. I was sitting there waiting for like a buck to pop out. Never saw it. When I got down, I had walked down this drainage from the truck to get to the spot. And this is like an hour later, I go back up and a scrape, which was not there previously, was wide open. It was, 4 or 5 feet wide in diameter and you could smell it from there. And I'm like, that's not what I was smelling in the tree because that was like 200 yards from there. Like, there's no way to smell that. But it smelled exactly like that buckface, like stanky tarsal gland, just buck urine. And I'm like, I bet you that buck swung through this little thick clear cut, opened that scrape up, swung up the ridge I was on, and walked that ridge point down and probably got, 30, 40 yards behind me. I just couldn't see him, but you could smell him.
Wow.
But yeah, it's kind of funny. So I don't know. Some people may pick up on that, but Andrew can't smell anything. And then Michael Pike, our buddy Michael's hilarious. He shot a deer on a piece of pug that me and Pepper went to go help track on. And he called me. He's like, man, there's a lot of scrapes in here. I'm like, cool. So like I park the truck, I go walk to the spot, and I'm like, I get 40 yards down this little logging road, and I can smell a scrape, like just like tarsal gland nastiness. And I look up, and there's a scrape 30, 40 yards from me. I walk to it, and you could smell that thing from like, again, 30, 40 yards downwind, plain as day, just stinky buck urine. And I go talk to Pike. I was like, hey, man, did you see that scrape close to the trucks? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, was it open this morning? Like, did you see it get pawed out? He's like, I'm not sure. And I'm like, could you smell it? He's like, no, I can't smell. And like, ever since he had COVID, he can't smell real good anyways. And I'm like, dude, that thing is pungent. Like, there was something there this freaking morning using that thing. And it was kind of funny while we went on our little scouting trip 2 days ago, I guess it was.
Yeah.
One of the scrapes we'd found, you couldn't really smell the scrape the second you kicked the ground up.
Oh,
it
dude.
It released that buck urine that was like in the scrape. and it was like, oh my god, it like hit you like a freaking brick wall.
It's like opening, like if you have to like open a garbage can or something, and it just like wafts up in your face.
The second you,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
we kicked out that scrape to open it up a bit bigger, like it just hit you like God. Like okay, well, there's definitely bucks using this pretty heavily.
Yeah, I didn't even have to pee in it. It was
No.
good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I haven't, it's like I haven't got to smell that really good enough to be able to probably identify.
You'll get to if you come on that hunt with us for sure. Like, cause we'll be going by those scrapes at some point or another, and man, the buck sign in that area is just phenomenal. I mean, like
Yeah.
probably the best spot I have in Alabama as far as just buck sign goes. I mean, it's just unreal how much buck sign is in there.
And y'all gonna let me go, huh?
Oh yeah,
Good deal.
Another sufferfest.
yeah.
Okay.
Death
yeah.
March. Hey, that's how when Sam first started hanging out with us and everything. Like Tiffany introduced us because Tiffany's friends with Sam's wife, and I was telling Tiffany because she was like, "Why don't you take Sam hunting?" I'm like, "I'm gonna take him on a death march first time because like you gotta weed people out." And she told him that, and he thought it was hilarious. I'm like, "You can't tell him I'm gonna take him on a death march. That totally negates."
Yeah,
Like you got to
exactly.
be like, "Hey man, we're just gonna go out there real quick and then take him on a 4.5 mile." Hellfest through a thicket and see how he reacts.
Yeah. It's like, can he stay cool and calm in the moment, or does he like open up and react to the situation?
Yeah, we did take Sam on a death march in turkey season. He handled it extremely well.
Yeah.
Actually, we had to run away from a thunderstorm, like literally run from a thunderstorm. So
Yeah.
it was fun. We had a good time.
Make it back to the truck right when lightning was striking around us.
Tornado sirens going
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
And at that moment, Sam was like, "Who are these people?" Anyways, all right, we got to get to our Q&A section. Jacob, you want to tell everyone about that?
Yeah. So again, on all these outro breakdown episodes, we try to answer a lot of these Q&A questions where you guys can submit questions to be answered on the podcast on these episodes, and you can do that by clicking the link. If you're listening to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever, in the show notes below, there'll be a link there. You can click and submit your question there. Also, if you're on YouTube, the link is down in the show description below. So in the video notes, you'll see down below, it'll have a link for Q&As. Feel free to submit them. We've had some really good ones come in. Also, we've had a ton of listener success stories come in. I mention this every single week, but y'all are racking up some deer right now. Like, it's been absolutely insane.
Good deer,
Like,
man.
November was insane. But that link is also down in the show notes below. So, again, in the video podcast or on the audio feed, go down the show notes. You can click and actually submit your listener success story there. Or if you just happen to forget it's in the show notes, all you have to do is go to the southernoutdoorsman.com, the website, and there's a link there to submit your listener success stories. And again, there's been some crazy good ones.
Yeah, for sure. All right, this first one is from a fellow who's written in a couple good listener success stories this year and a couple Q&As. Mason Brook from Georgia.
Oh, he's back.
He's back, baby.
Man, he killed him a drop tine deer and
Yeah, he
tagged
killed.
out
So Mason killed a drop tine deer. Mason, we might have to get you on the podcast, my man. I'm not gonna lie. I might have to hit you up soon. He said, "Yo, got a question to cover on the podcast." Okay, a little bit of backstory actually on this. Mason wrote in. He's got a property in Georgia. He's got a hunting club. It's almost all clear cut. It's very gentle rolling hills. And before season, they came in and sprayed that clear cut and killed a lot of it back, like they were getting ready to burn it. And then I think they did end up burning it, right? You remember? I'm pretty sure they did end up. But anyways, it's got like really skinny little SMZs, actually similar to our club. Those like mulched areas where it's just really thick on the edges, and that SMZ is like 20, 30 yards wide. It's a lot like that, where it's just the whole property is just really, really thick and nasty.
By the way, what is it, SMZ again?
Streamside Management Zone. Man, we got blown up on some YouTube comments because I guess we did an episode where we didn't explain that. Because typically when we say SMZ, we try to explain.
Well,
what
there's
it
a
is now.
video podcast, and one of the titles, or part of the title, is "What is an SMZ?" It's on the thumbnail image.
Yes,
Yeah,
actually.
go click it. Go to the. Go
Check it out.
Yeah, it has it on
It's
there.
where they leave mature timber around a creek in order to prevent erosion when they're logging.
Typically, that's where you're going to find hardwoods.
Typically, that's where your oaks are going to be. So it'll be pines on the ridges, hardwoods in the bottoms. That bottom is your SMC. But anyways, so he's got skinny little SMZs, and we talked about, he wrote in a couple questions about how to attack the property, and it was, I think we said, look in those SMZs for feed trees, look at the low spots going through the thickets, try to find community scrapes. And one reason I want to get him on is because he did that extremely well, and he killed a drop tine buck out there, like a really nice.
He tagged out with $2. Yeah.
Yeah, so he killed a couple bucks this year, and he said so he had his cameras on scrapes, I believe, and that's what this relates to. So he said, I feel like it'll be a really good time of year if you want to answer it in the next few weeks, which he wrote this in like yesterday. So we're bumping this one to the top because it's kind of timely. My cams have gone absolutely dead. Most are on community scrapes, some on pinch points, and a few on corn feeders. We're coming up on the does and fawns that weren't bred in November. We'll hit that 28-day cycle again, and it'll be a second rut one of these days. Where should I strategically place my cameras in late season after a majority of the does have been bred already? So they already had their rut. The community scrape thing, like we just talked about the community scrapes like on our club. So like our peak rut is going to be like first week of January for our hunting club. And that's why I was saying earlier that right now it's like a bell curve, and you put those cameras on those scrapes right now, and over the next 2 or 3 weeks, they should go up and up and up and get more and more pictures. And then when that rut happens, it's going to kind of die, like when you're at the top of the bell curve. And then when you're coming back off of it, the activity is going to ramp up again. So he's like kind of past that whole bell curve. He's like on the downswing now. And that's after the rut. So I don't know. I personally would leave them on the community scrapes because I think they're still going to use them. But I'd maybe focus a little bit more on food sources also. And if you're not having luck on the corn feeders, then with how thick the property is and how they burned it and everything, if you could identify some kind of food source that they're eating, maybe not in the cut, but on the edges of it, like on the edges of those SMZs, if you could find some greenbrier or some honeysuckle or some jasmine or something like that, that might be something good to put a camera on. Just like not even just like a patch of it, but if there's like a nice edge where there's a lot of it, if you could put your camera kind of facing down that edge where you could catch them walking up and down the edge browsing on it, that might not be bad. Jacob, what do you think?
So this is the time when I would say I would get back out walking the property. Like definitely, I think you need to leave cameras on some of the better community scrapes that you found. And if you have multiple community scrapes on a property, that's really good because a lot of times you may find one or two, but if you have like 5 or 6 that you think are community scrapes where a bunch of different bucks are using them, that's very impressive. But I would get back out and try to see by walking a whole bunch if you can go find more fresh buck sign because the bucks are still going to be laying down sign right now, especially back in their core areas. And if you can get out and start walking a whole bunch and start finding some fresher rubs or even some other smaller scrapes popping up, maybe putting cameras in and around those locations. You know, you mentioned the whole food source thing, which I think's a good point. I know some guys I've talked to in the past, not necessarily guests we've had on podcasts, but have had luck late post rut going into some of the thickest cover on their properties that they think are holding bucks. And if you're allowed to do this, especially on private land where baiting's allowed, putting a batted corn out in that thick cover with a camera on and just seeing if anything's come up to use it. Because some of those bucks may not be coming all the way over to like one of your corn feeders if it's in the wide open, well away from their core area. So if that's an option for you, that's something that you could potentially do. Or also just go try to cut some big tracks. Like go walk your creek drainages and try to find like where you're finding big tracks at. If you can find that and potentially backtrack the direction you think the deer is going to and coming from, kind of hone in on an area in there that actually would funnel deer around to put a camera on and see if you can catch a buck still moving back and forth. Because the deer is still going to move. He just might completely shift a little bit from like what he was doing from pre-rut to now he's got like a little bit different core area that he's getting back into as the season's, you know, not necessarily coming to a close, but it's getting close to the end of season in Georgia because I think they close right around the first of the year, something like that.
I think it's a little bit later into January, but yeah.
So, but again, you know, focusing on those areas, and also if you have an area in mind where you consistently see does, if you could find some of that cover that the does are truly using a whole bunch, it might not be a bad idea to put a camera somewhere in there and see if you can catch a buck, like catch that mature buck actually bumping through that thick cover where these does are bedding at, and seeing if he comes through and checks and seeing if any of those does are coming back into heat.
Yeah, and I feel like too, this actually relates back to how our season's gone, Mike. Where in bow season you were like deer, 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 and then gun season opened, and gun season coincided. There was like some cold fronts right there in middle November, and really our leaf drop heavily coincides with frosts and cold fronts, and the leaf drop really happened right there around when gun season opened. not like the main leaves, but a lot of the understory had all the leaves had fallen off, and so the woods looked vastly different, and it changed the pattern. And I feel like when that happens, the deer actually are getting more and more concentrated into that thicker cover. And so I think like in Mason's situation here, where now we're like on into December, there's no leaves anywhere on anything. I think they're even more concentrated in the thickest stuff ever, and that can make them kind of hard to find. Because
Yeah.
I mean, they're in the thick stuff, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if you can, especially if it's not like tens of, 10, 20, 40, 50 acre thickets or bigger thickets than that, if they're little 5, 10 acre little thickets or smaller than that, you can walk the edges of those and try to find sign coming in and out of it, like rubs and scrapes, but also like try to find trails and crossings,
Yeah.
and then line your cameras up in some of that and to see, put a camera there, leave it for 7 days, nothing happens, keep moving those cameras around until you start catching bucks on camera. But again, leave a couple of those cameras on some of your better community scrapes, because at some point they're going to come back. They might not work the scrape, but they're going to hit the licking branch at some point, because it goes
Yeah.
back. We need to reiterate this. A guest we had on who's had a lot of success post rut killing really big bucks on scrapes is Drew Atkinson from Arkansas. And he talks about like those bucks, in January, like he's had a lot of luck. They were up there that first last of October going to that first week and a half, 2 weeks in November is like their rut in that northern part of the state. And he catches a lot of bucks using scrapes December and January. And then he sees a lot of like really tight patterns with them, because that's when he'll implement. And this is something else you can do, Mason. Even though you're bucked out, you tagged out, go get you some doe estrus if it's legal to use in your state. Put it out in a couple of those scrapes and see if that gets the bucks a little bit more fired up and actually come checking those scrapes more often. And that's exactly what Drew Atkinson does late season. Has a lot of success killing bucks on scrapes where he implements that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, got to move on. This is from Stephen Brandt. This one is about highways and buck bedding. Do you treat highways the same as waters/creeks when it comes to buck bedding? I've seen bucks bed with their backs up next to a highway, especially on high-pressure public land. What's your thoughts? What do you think?
We've interviewed somebody about this that tried to kill a really big buck off that was bedding pretty close to the highway, but you couldn't like get there from the highway.
Wow.
And also
I don't remember.
there's a listener who I've talked to out of Maryland. I cannot remember. I want to say his first name is Cade, who found a really big buck doing the exact same thing, where he's like bedded up on like a small point, like the interstate runs on top of a big ridge, and there's a little small secondary point, and it's bedding in that location, like 75 yards off the highway. He doesn't think he's crossing the highway, but he's bedding up, next to the highway and then dropping off in the evenings. So one of my uncles, Anthony, who's been on the podcast before, they were in a hunting club somewhere in South Alabama, and they actually had an interstate that ran through the property, and it had an overpass, and they would kill bucks during the rut under that overpass, or around, like they'd use that overpass as a funnel, where the deer, if they want to come from one side of the road to the other side of the road, not get hit by cars, they went under the overpass, over the bridge, they went under the bridge. And they would have stand sites, in and around that, whether they're bow hunting or they're gun hunting, kind of getting off that, where like when those deer pinch down, they come back out into the woods, they're right there for you. So like if you have that option, that could be really, really good as well. But I've heard multiple people talk about like deer bedding in and around highways and interstates, and it's not necessarily some of the guys I talked to, it's not necessarily they think it's like a safety thing. It's just it's an area that they just don't get a lot of pressure for whatever reason. And it's not necessarily like water or anything. It's just like a lot of people aren't going to, be 150 yards off a highway, 200 yards off a highway. So it might just be the one area that nobody ever goes to, whether it's a piece of private land or a piece of public land, and those deer just down bedded and traveling through that area.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I don't really have a lot of experience with that myself. I mean, I've found beds close to roads and everything, but even with our GPS stuff that we looked at from Auburn University, a lot of the daytime core areas, daytime bedding locations for the bucks in that were very close to roads. So, in a couple instances, they were paved roads or highways. In other instances, it was just logging roads, but it was like where a road would fork or something like that. And I don't think it's like, I go back to like what Josh Driver said, that a deer, they're not consciously acting, they're subconsciously reacting, meaning that the deer is not like, oh, I know, I'm going to sit right here on this hill next to the highway above the parking lot so I can see when the hunters are coming in. Like, they can't think like that. He's just sitting there because he like doesn't get messed with right there. Like, no one is walking all over that spot. No one's bumping him out of it. So that's why he's there. So it's like a function of that. And that's why, like, on our hunting club, for instance, I haven't found a lot of that like I found in other places. Like, the deer are in areas like where they're kind of supposed to be. Like, it's pretty predictable where the deer are on the hunting club, where if I'm hunting some public, they're not always that predictable, I think, because of the pressure, because people are going to the spots where the deer should be, and so then they start doing weird stuff, you know. So, I mean, that's my opinion on it. Yeah, I mean, I don't. You have anything else to add?
No, I mean it's definitely something worth scouting. Like I guess based off,
I would
his
look at the Ys and the roads, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, is he talking about highway? Did he specifically say highways or just roads?
Do you treat highways the same as water/creeks when it comes to buck bedding?
Yeah, I don't know if I would treat it like water or creeks.
No,
I mean,
I don't think I would.
unless he means like they're bedding up against it, maybe. But like
Like a back wall.
yeah, kind of like what PK
Doug White.
Doug White. God, Doug, sorry.
Jacob would forget his own mom's name.
Yeah,
I swear.
And but yeah, I guess it could be like that, like a back wall. But it's just, I think it's just more so. It's an area that deer typically don't get a lot of pressure. They don't run into a lot of people, and that's the only reason why they're in those locations.
Yeah. All right. Last up, this is from Johnny from Alabama. He didn't leave his last name. He was wondering. He said, "I was wondering how would you go about killing mature bucks in very highly pressured mountains of blankety blank national forest that is full of stand and dog hunters. I found it very hard to get a pattern on any specific buck or even find deer consistently." He named the place that he was, and I wish I could say it to you because we're familiar with it. So I'll take this one first. With how it's highly pressured like that and it has all the dog hunters on it, I mean, it kind of relates to that last question. It's like, where are the other people not going? And I wouldn't even necessarily worry about the dog hunters that much. Like, if you're in an area with really good cover, where the deer have ample escape opportunities, we have some experience hunting places that are dog hunted, and we've killed mature bucks in places that are dog hunted, and it always comes down to finding an area where the deer can get away from those dogs without having to go past people, I guess. So whether that be thick cover or you said it's like a mountainous area, like aggressive terrain, really steep, nasty stuff that either the dogs aren't really going through, the dogs are funneling around it, or the people aren't getting up in there and standing. Because like those dog hunters, most of those guys are not like hiking in really far. They're on roads or they're on ridges that are not far off of roads. At least as I understand.
Yeah, it seems like they're just trying to get the dogs to run the deer back by.
Yeah, that's why they got the dogs.
Yeah,
they ain't bushwhacking really.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that would just be the biggest thing is like getting far enough away from road access that a dog hunter is not going to go to. And like you said, like if deer live in an area with dogs, they're getting constantly ran by dogs. That's just something that they have to deal with. But you'll still find mature bucks in those areas because they don't get killed. You know, if a dog gets on them, they're not running towards a road.
Every once in a while, those dog hunters will kill a big old buck. But and to me, that just goes to show that like obviously these deer are good enough at avoiding these dogs and dog hunters that they can get this old and this big. So there's something in there where it's like they kill that. Once in a blue moon, they kill that freaking 6.5-year-old just monarch. Like that deer lived for 6 years in front of a bunch of people who would have killed it for like all these years, and he's made it this long. So it's like, where is he going? That because there's a spot out there. I mean, it's not like there's no area where the deer are. Like they're in there somewhere. I don't know like exactly what you've been doing to try to find deer or bucks or anything, but like, man, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. So gotta change it up a little bit, man. Like I would start with the thick cover, and then I would go look for aggressive terrain, meaning just like really steep, like rocky, just terrible stuff that is hard to walk through. And if you can find that in combination with thick cover, then you'll be in really good shape. You'll probably find some stuff.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. And you also, one thing, it'd probably be a good idea, like if you know there's a lot of dog hunting pressure there, and this goes for any state, if you could actually, if you could learn and know some of these dog hunters and what they typically do, and like, it seems like these guys probably have similar areas they always let their dogs out at.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, like there's certain areas they always are hunting. If you look at a map from that 30,000 foot view, you can kind of figure out, like looking at LNX, what's a mile and a half to 2 miles from there that they're not going to be getting to.
Oh, yeah.
And then using that, be like, okay, well, I'm going to try to go hike in there and see if I can find any sign. Because you could probably find something where the dog hunters aren't molesting those deer. It'd be really hard because we've had people write in like, man, I'm in a dog hunting club, or I got neighbors that are dog hunters. I've got 200 acres to hunt. What should I do? I'm like, well, that's a harder situation than if you have a huge piece of public land, and you can kind of pinpoint potentially where guys are actually turning dogs loose and what they're really hunting a whole bunch, and then try to find something that, again, that's just out of their reach, that maybe the dogs run deer through there, but the hunters aren't going in there to go shoot a deer.
Yeah, for sure. And like, just because it's a dog hunting area doesn't mean that it's going to be bad. Because in the past, we've gone out of our way to a dog hunting area and had good luck.
Well, it's like, great example. There's some stuff in South Alabama. I mean,
Yeah.
like there's a bunch of states that have dog hunters, but like there's some stuff in South Alabama where they kill big deer, both on dog hunts and also steel hunters.
Yep.
And it's like, don't
get discouraged.
Yeah, don't get discouraged, because I've seen some people that killed some absolute giants, especially in certain areas of the state that are highly pressured by dogs, and they still kill big deer.
Mm-hmm.
And
don't say too much now. Come on.
I know someone who uses the dog pressure for their advantage.
Oh, yeah. In Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I was actually going to bring him up. He
Yeah.
mentioned it on the podcast. Are you talking about Austin?
Uh-uh.
Oh, I don't know who you're talking about then.
No. No, listen to the show.
Oh, okay.
And he says, like, if he can go out on like when guys are dog hunting and get in the middle of where these guys aren't going, but the dogs are running them, get in those spots, and he's killed some really, really good deer doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we did that. We've done that in the past. Kind of a similar situation where, like, the dog hunters kind of just didn't really get to this one area, and we keyed in on it, and we had some luck. So, like, it can happen, but like I said, just look at where those people are not going, and whether it be the dog hunters or the still hunters or whatever. So, anyways, I think that's all we got, man.
Yeah. Appreciate everybody who's been buying hats. Again, get the old Southern Outdoorsman chocolate chip hat. Again, appreciate everybody's support. Orders are going out ASAP. So if you want some hats, you want some Southern Outdoorsman gear before Christmas gets here, put your order in. And I package every order myself, so you get you a little note from Jacob Myers, okay? But appreciate everybody who's been buying merchandise. Again, that link will be down below as well, or you just go over to the website, southernoutdoorsman.com. Appreciate everybody watching. Appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. And, hey, remember, write in your listener success stories. We've had some great ones coming this fall, but we still have a ton of season left, especially for some of us in the deep south. The seasons go really long.
We're going to have one from Mike soon.
Yeah, we're going to have one from Mike. Hopefully. So, we make sure you write your listener success stories in, guys. But, again, just appreciate y'all watching, appreciate y'all listening, and we'll catch you back on the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. And remember, y'all stay Southern.